Bill Fruth is the president of POLICOM Corporation, an independent economics research firm located in Palm City, Florida, which specializes in studying the dynamics of local economies. Prior to founding POLICOM in 1995, Fruth served as vice president of a major industrial land development company, directing the development and marketing of a 500-acre corporate park in the West Palm Beach, Florida area. Previously, he was president of the Business Development Board of Palm Beach County. He has personally evaluated the data for more than 700 local economies in the United States, created more than 200 economic and community studies, and has provided presentations and workshops for state and national associations, community forums in 39 different states. He has extensive experience in economic development and is nationally recognized as a leader in the field of geographic economics. And Bill was intensely involved in the entire process that led up to the Pinellas by Design plan and in the approval and review of the plan itself. So we would love to have him come and give us an update and bring us into the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's really a pleasure for me to return to Pinellas County. It has been 10 years. I guess you could have done it a little earlier, but you must have forgotten what I said last time. During this session, we're going to talk about how a local economy works, this flow of money into an area and the flow of money out, what causes that to happen, so that you can better understand the problems Pinellas County has. We're going to look at the results and how well you did on the 2002 goal study that I created for you back in about 10 or 12 years ago. We will look at the current condition of your economy, how it compares to other areas, is it growing or declining, and perhaps what's causing that to happen. I've been asked to create another goal study for the county in this month. And I'm going to review with you how I created that study and what the new economic goal will be for the area. And finally, we're going to talk about what needs to be done in order to achieve the economic goal. Now, I got my first lesson on how local economies work back in 1980. How many were around in 1980? As time goes by, the audiences, somehow can't relate to the good old days anymore. But that was back when I was first elected mayor of Tiffin, Ohio. Anybody been to Tiffin, Ohio? Yeah, well, sure. If you remember back in 1980, things weren't going that well. My county had some 15% unemployment. The retail stores were closing, factories were closing, and my first legal obligation at the age of 27, by the way, was to prepare a balanced budget for this city. And I worked and worked and worked and worked on this budget. And finally, after a firecracker session with the city council over all the cuts we had to make to survive, I met with one of our probably the most prolific political gadfly in our community. This is the individual who had lived in town all his life. He's about 98 years old. He's 120 years old. He knew everybody in town. He attended every city council meeting, spoke on every issue of every city council meeting. Might be somebody like that in your communities. But every now and then, these folks are right. So I asked him the question. I said, what in the world is wrong with our economy? Well, he looked me square in the eye and said, there's a hole in the bucket, Mr. Mayor. I said, what? He said, there's a hole in the bucket, and there's more money leaking out than what's coming in on top. And at that time, all my study of political and economic theory began to crystallize on how local economies work. Because you see, all the wealth of a community is in a bucket. And this, in Pinellas County is a community and has a bucket of wealth. And this money goes back and forth from person to person, business to business. Throughout this bucket, the whole series of thousands of transactions occurred. This money follows the path of a three-dimensional spider web as it gets mixed and churned within a community. But there's a problem. There's a hole in the bucket. And the wealth of a community is being drained from it. Every time you purchase an automobile, a good share of that money goes back to Nashville or Detroit or Tokyo, wherever the car was made. Every time you go on vacation, buy a shirt or a pair of shoes, make your life insurance premium payment, money leaves your economy and goes to those economies in which the product was manufactured, the service performed. The wealth of a community is constantly being drained from it, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Eventually, it will all go away. So what does a community have to do? Well, it has to import new, rejuvenating wealth into its economy. And after this money enters the economy, it gets mixed and churned, go back and forth. All sorts of different transactions occur until it is eventually consumed and leaves the area. An economy will grow in size in direct proportion to the amount of money flowing into it. If you increase the amount of flow into an area, the economy will grow. But unfortunately, in many areas in the United States, that flow into the area was reduced and the size of their economy contracted. Well, how do we get money into an area? Well, this is principally done through the business activity of your primary or contributory industries. They sell their goods or services outside the area, thus importing wealth to a community. Typically, about 25% of the people who work in an area work for companies or enterprises that are contributory, and 75% feed off that activity. Typically, only about 5% of your businesses are contributory or primary, and 95% feed off the money being brought into an area. Your consumptive businesses, which represent about 95% of the enterprises, consume the wealth being brought into an area. The primary businesses sell their goods and services outside a community, thus import money. Their geographic location influences their costs, thus their operating profitability. Since their market is not local, they don't have to be in a community to do business, and they will move when it is unprofitable to be located within a community. So, just a quick summary. Since I'm going to be up for 2 hours here, I'm going to be summarizing. All you have to do is just remember these 5 summary points and you can go home. Primary industries cause economic growth. Bingo. There are 381 metropolitan areas in the United States. There are 536 micropolitan areas. A metropolitan area must be at least one county. Typically, there are 4 or 5 counties. They must have a city of at least 50,000 people, and they are joined together by economic flow, typically by commuting patterns of cross-pollination among counties that people live and work, earn, and spend. Your micropolitan areas have towns of about 10,000 people, and they're the smaller ones. Pinellas County is a part of a metropolitan area. Every year I rank the metropolitan areas for economic strength. My first rankings came out in 1997. And economic strength is the long-term tendency for an area to consistently grow on both size and quality. I look at 23 economic factors which measure how this economy has behaved and how it has consistently grown in size over that period of time. These are the 10 strongest metropolitan area economies. With Des Moines, I was there just 3 weeks ago and actually caught a terrible cold on the flight back. Austin, Washington, D.C. In fact, I can't believe anybody's better than Washington, D.C. $1 trillion goes into that economy every year from the government. Seattle, Nashville, San Antonio, Fargo. By the way, Fargo has not declined in employment in 32 years. Omaha, Kansas City, and Huntsville. Now, these are the 10 weakest metropolitan areas, and Dan, these are tough areas. I've done work in Flint, and finally they asked me back. I said, I just won't go back anymore. It is just a dysfunctional economy, and my last recommendation to them, change the name of your town. That'll help you more than anything. But those are some pretty distressed areas. Of the 25 strongest metropolitan areas, 11 are state capitals. 23 of the 25 have commercial airports, 4 have saltwater ports. 25 are located on interstate highways of the 25 strongest. 9 have Major League Baseball teams, 9 NFL football teams, and 10 have NBA basketball teams. All 25 have active, well-financed economic development organizations. And all 25 have a statue of some important person in a park within the community. By the way, since Commissioner Seal's been involved in this for almost 15 years, if we ever accomplish this thing, let's find a park and build a statue to it. Florida has a whole bunch of metropolitan areas. This map shows the metros in Florida. I'm just going to show you the 10 strongest in the state of Florida. Miami's the strongest at 114, Tampa, St. Pete 116, Orlando 117, 143. All of these areas were ranked much higher 4 or 5 years ago, but because of the building boom and the building meltdown, it not only caused loss of jobs, but it caused volatility. And as a result, many of the Florida communities are not looked upon as being significantly strong compared to the other metropolitan areas. In 2001, Pinellas County asked me to do a study to answer this question. What is the economic impact upon Pinellas County of reaching physical build-out? We go back some 13 or 14 years ago, looking around, our nation is a relatively young nation, and I'm not sure that this whole issue of the economic impact of build-out had ever been studied. I know I couldn't find any studies on it. And so we labored through the data and found areas in the United States that had built out, and we looked, okay, what happened after they physically built out? And the answer to that question is pretty simple. The Pinellas County economy will begin to decline when it reaches build-out. Because every community in the United States of America that reached economic build-out began to decline up until that point. And we're looking at data through the 1990s. And so that was inevitable. It was going to happen that your economy would decline. In 2002, the county asked me to do a goals study. Basically, a goals study is you look to the future and say, okay, the goal is to increase the size and quality of the county's economy. More jobs, more money, more transactions, that's the economic goal. And we can't be unreasonable in our economic goal. It has to be reasonable. I created an economic goal study for Shasta County, California, back in 1999, year 2000. At that time, I did a reasonable goal where I thought they could achieve through a diligent effort, and their board of directors of the EDC there said, wait a minute, no. We want to be a top 10 economy in your rankings within 5 years. What is it going to take to do that? I said, well, I could do the math for you. And, I did one of these things like, the rocket taking off, and you have to create maybe 8,000 primary jobs per year for the next, okay, that's what we want to do. I said, I'm warning you against it. No, that's our goal. And about 4 years later, the guy called me up from the EDC and said, hey, Mr. Fruth, yeah, what's the problem? He said, my job's on the line. Why? Well, I haven't reached those annual milestones. I haven't been able to reach those jobs. I said, no one could. I warned you about that. So the goal has to be reasonable. And so I set a reasonable goal for you. And the first step in this process is to project into the future what your economy will look like if you do nothing. If you do nothing, let things go to chance, what would the economy look like? So we created economic projections from the year 2003 through roughly 2023, but I'm going to show you the projections through the year 2013. And this is what I projected you to be. This is the 1990s. This is 1990, and you had some of the greatest economic growth of any area in the United States. So we begin here about 2000, 2001, and I predicted you would level off unemployment roughly 2008 and begin to decline in jobs by 2013 and 2012. Boy, did people yell at me. I said, I didn't know what I was talking about, because I said, well, look at this tremendous growth we had here. How can you say we're going to level off? I said, because you're going to run out of land. That's what's going to happen. University of Florida predicted that there would be 150,000 more jobs than what I was predicting. Fine. I set a reasonable goal. And the reasonable goal basically in that we set up annual milestones for the formation of new primary jobs. Because primary jobs, primary employers, they hire people, the money goes into the economy, that ripples and churns, creates a whole bunch of other jobs. The whole thing is around primary jobs. And says, okay, we're going to create 2,300 in 2003. 24, this is similar to what I did for Shasta County, but this is reasonable because these are just about what you did in the 1990s on an annual basis. It can't be achievable. So over this 10-year period, you're supposed to create 28,000 new primary jobs. If you did that, this is what the line would do. This is the goal line is right here. Instead of declining, you would go up to about 730,000 jobs if you reached those milestones for primaries. Well, what happened? Well, this year, a couple months ago, I was asked to evaluate how the county reached those milestones. A performance evaluation, basically. On an annual basis, did you reach the creation of those new primary jobs? Well, guess what? No. In 2003, you're supposed to create 2,300, you lost 1,700. You're supposed to create 2,400, lost 2,500. Lost one here, gained 3,400, lost 147, lost 4,400, lost 57. You total them all up. Instead of having a net gain of 28,000, the county lost 8,000 primary jobs. Well, what did that do? What is the reality? What's the employment now? Well, we lost those in manufacturing in these industrial sectors, wholesale trade. And by the way, when you evaluate primary jobs, there's nothing in economic data that puts a little star next to an industrial classification and says this is primary. That isn't there. The test of a primary employer is where do they sell their stuff? And that needs to be outside the economy. So I have developed formulas and equations that sift through the industrial data to try to extract the primary jobs from these industrial sectors. As an example, not every manufacturing job is primary. Your local bakery and your local printers are classified as manufacturers, but their marketplace is local, so they don't sell their stuff outside. Information technology has a whole bunch of different sectors. Most are not primary. And so through this system of trying to identify the primaries, these are just within these industries, employers that import money. So we lost 8,300 manufacturing, 1,800 in the wholesale trade, about 1,000 information. But look where we gained. Professional and technical and corporate headquarters. There were gains over that period of time. But there was a net loss of 7,000 or 8,000. Look what happened. This is what actually happened. I was chastised for projecting that. And look where we are today. We are roughly, in fact, there are fewer people working here today than in 1998. That's how low the employment level has gone in Pinellas County. All righty, let's look at Pinellas County. Relative economy. Because after we understand all the things that have happened and why they have happened, we'll have a better understanding of what we have to do. Part of my assignment this year was to create an economic comparative study that I compared your economy to several other areas in the United States for economic growth. And that study, I think all these studies are going to be posted, as I understand, on the website, yeah. Part of that comparative study, I compared you to Hillsborough, Palm Beach County, Denver, Colorado, Mecklenburg, North Carolina, and Wake, North Carolina, which is Charlotte. And these are what they viewed as competitive areas for the economy. These are the areas I was asked to compare your growth rate to. And I did for 55 different items for 3 different time periods. They're all in this book. I'm going to go through every page. No, I'm not. It's 122 pages of data, and no, I love it. See, I'm a data junkie. I eat data for breakfast in the morning. I love it. But I'm going to show you some of the results of this. Now, this is the population growth for the last 10 years, ranked against the 381 metropolitan areas in the country. And the United States over this 10-year period grew in population about 0.9%. The state of Florida 1.5. Pinellas County had no growth. Actually, it's a little bit of a negative sign there. This ranked 346th fastest growth rate among the 381 metros. Hillsborough had 49th fastest. Palm Beach, we go down the line here. But look at the 2 North Carolina areas, 10th fastest in population, 3rd fastest in population. Let's take a look at another comparison. Here's job growth for the last 10 years. Nation about 0.9%, Florida 1.3%. You had a job loss of 0.3% for the last 10 years. That ranked 355th among the 381 areas. Hillsborough is a little bit better. Then we go down to our North Carolina. Well, let's look at Denver. They had growth in jobs at 206 at that growth rate, a little bit less than the national average. And our 2 North Carolina areas had some very brisk job growth. A couple interesting things. Well, here's worker earnings. This is also a good indicator. This is all the money earned by everyone who works in the county, and the profits of proprietors, and all their fringe benefits, and everything else that goes in there. The nation grew at 3.5%. Your county grew at 2.1, 334, one of the slowest rates in the country. Hillsborough a little bit better. Palm Beach wasn't too good. But here our North Carolina friends had some pretty strong comparative growth in volume of money earned by everybody who works there. But we then look at, you can also learn about the character of an economy by looking at this data. And certain things pop up. In 2012, Pinellas County had per capita retirement transfers of 8,500. This is the 24th highest in the country. And Hillsborough wasn't a much younger area. Palm Beach is also an older area. But look how in these three areas, per capita retirement is ranked very low. And this is, of course, about 24% of the population is over the age of 65 in Pinellas County. That's twice the national average. Another indicator here about the influence of retirement, that Pinellas County's per capita Medicare, 2,900, is the 10th highest in the country. And I'm not going to make a prediction right now, but I'm going to guess that of the revenues going into your hospitals in this county, at least 65% of all revenues are Medicare dollars going into your hospital. It might be higher than that. And I know a hospital administrator in Pasco County told me that 80% of their revenues was Medicare. So, but then we get into, Palm Beach is pretty old, but once again, the other three at the bottom have very little presence of retirement. Also can find red flags when you go through this data. And this might be the most distressing thing to me that I picked up on, and looking at what happened in the last 10 years. Per capita Medicaid. Now, Medicaid is medical assistance to the poor. Back in, over the last 10 years, you had the 6% average annual growth rate, which was the 84th fastest in the country. Back in 2002, you ranked 250th among the metropolitan areas. By 2012, you had grown to 184th highest in the nation. Food stamps, per capita food stamps, grew at 22.7% on an annual basis the last 10 years to 25th fastest growth rate in the country. In 2002, your $42 ranked 292nd, is now up to the 139th highest in the country. These are two real red flags. When you see that relative welfare is growing so fast, that shows a significant weakening in an economy. All right, let's continue. Let's visually look at how the area has grown in size for, I'm going to show you a couple different ways. One is employment, and the other would be in worker earnings. And because this puts everything in perspective of what we're looking at. And what this chart shows us is I factored the data. This is literally the percentage increase in jobs in your area going back to 1983. And I factored the data and compared you. This is the average of those 10 strongest metropolitan area economies I showed you, the Des Moines in that group. And this is the average of the Flint, Michigans of the world over the same period of time, 1983. So the question is, we're cruising along here, and you are growing in employment at the rate comparable or equal to the 10 strongest metropolitan areas in the country. Whoa, then you hit a brick wall, slowed down, and went into this big decline. Your decline actually was more brisk than the average of the weakest economies in the nation. Another way to look at the growing in size is take all your worker earnings, adjust it to the value of the 2012 dollar, calculate that and factor it. Now we can visually compare the growth in size by earnings. And once again, here are your 10 strongest areas, the 10 weakest areas, and look at Pinellas County, right there hugging the 10 strongest areas. And slowed down, declined. It's picking up a little bit right now. So visually, a couple characteristics here. What occurred here that didn't occur there? I know the answer to that, by the way. Primary industries. What industries bring the money into the economy? Well, I've developed mathematical formulas that I can sift through the data relatively fast to identify by percentage of contribution of the amount of money flowing in. This next graph will identify the sources, the principal sources, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 largest sources of money flowing into the area. And number one is manufacturing. Manufacturing is the single biggest economic contributor to Pinellas County. The second is the retirement industry. It is the second biggest industry in the county. Next is corporate headquarters. Healthcare pops up, and the way you do these formulas, you look for anomalies in a marketplace. Now, healthcare, the doctor offices are not primary. They're servicing, typically healthcare services the local population. The reason this popped up is that there's an abnormal amount of money flowing into your hospitals given your population. And a lot of that is driven then by the retirement industry because they use hospital services more than that. So a piece of that is as a result of retirement. Also, you have a lot of medical laboratories here that are doing work for people and companies outside the economy. They are primary and they're part of the healthcare industry. But there is also destination healthcare. People do come to your county for specific healthcare services because you are known as a pretty good location for healthcare. So, but next is finance and insurance, professional services, state government comes in here, and there's others. There's tourism, there's the federal government, but the big ones are right here in this cluster here as far as what's importing money to the economy. Oh, I have a couple announcements. On my website, policom.com, you can get all the economic strength rankings for all the metropolitan areas. You just download this PDF. They're all on there. There's all the maps for all the metro micropolitan areas. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that's on there that you can download. Some of you may not know. I was introduced as being from Palm City. Some of you may not know where that is. You know Palm Harbor and Palm Shores and Palm Beach and Palm Coast, and there are 12 palms in Florida. You may not know where this is, especially when I travel north. They have the foggiest idea where Palm Coast is, so I thought I'd tell you. And the way I'm going to show you this, I'm going to do what the engineers do. I'm going to triangulate. I'm going to draw 3 lines, and where those 3 lines intersect is where Palm City, Florida is. Alrighty, now to start off, you probably know this, but blue is water, brown is land. And the first line I'm going to draw is the path of Hurricane Francis. Yes, indeed, it was out here as a Category 4, slowed down to a Category 3, made landfall as a Category 2, came across your state just a little bit north of you, might have hit you, and carried off into the state of Alabama. The second line, 3 weeks later, Hurricane Jane came out here as a Category 4, made landfall as a 3, crossed over a state, came real close to you. The third line, 18 months later, Hurricane Wilma. Yes, that's right. Coming across here over an 18-month period, the eye of 3 hurricanes passed over my house. So now we know, that's all the Stewart Inlet right there. So now we know where I live, and I still live there because the quality of life is so good. We looked at growing in size from employment. Now I want to look at growing in quality, because growing in quality is equally as important as growing in size. Let me tell you what I mean. This goes to the great myth. The great myth is any new job will help the economy. I've heard this all my life. When I was in economic development, go ahead and get that company in here, even though they pay minimum wage. They'll create jobs and everything else. And this is in Palm Beach County. So my God, where are they going to work? And when I was mayor, he said, create any kind of job. Any kind of job will help the economy. Well, when you consider quality of the economy, you have to really question whether or not that's appropriate. And to learn this lesson, we need to review the game of baseball. You folks know the game of baseball. You've got a team just down the road here. Baseball will teach us the lesson on the quality of a local economy. And let me tell you what I mean. Suppose you have a baseball team. These are the batting averages of your players. Now, this is a fantasy team. Or it's a softball team, one of the two. But you've got one of your player bats 760, another's a 630 hitter, another's a 560 hitter, and you got some really good players, and you also have some scrubs. You've got a 243 batter, a 220 batter, and a 181 hitter. But your team batting average is 407. That's pretty good in any league. You have a really strong team. Now, suppose your sister calls you up and says, hey, look, my 2 sons, your 2 nephews, they can't find work. I want you to put them on your baseball team. You ask the question, are they any good? No, they're not any good, but put them on the team anyway. So you do, and you add them to the team, and guess what? She was right. One bats .220, and the one's an 181 hitter. Now, in this league, everyone has to play. By adding these 2 weak players to your team batting average went from 407 down to 369, a decline in quality. Suppose you like this idea of having a lot of players on your team, and you decide to trade your best player, your 760 hitter, for 3 players that bat .220. And you make the trade, and you got this biggest team in the league now, your best player left, you got the weaker players joining the team. You got bigger, but your team batting average dropped down to 305. Team got bigger, but the quality of the team declined. Let's go back to the beginning. And suppose your 2 best players, your 760 hitter and your 630 hitter, contract expired last night. You forgot all about it. They left the team on a bus. They're in Albuquerque by now because they have a new employer. You haven't had time to replace them. So in this league, you have to have at least 9 players, so they're supposed to come and at bat an automatic out. As a result, your team batting average goes from 407 down to 252 in a volatile manner. Well, these are baseball batting averages. What does this have to do with local economies? Well, they are actually average earnings per worker relative to wages. And in a strong economy, they maintain a ratio of high-wage jobs to low-wage jobs, maintaining a strong average for the area. In this economy, they created more low-wage jobs relative to high-wage jobs, and the quality of their economy, the average in the area, declined. In this economy, they lost high-wage jobs, but created a whole bunch of low-wage jobs. They have a real big economy, but the quality has declined significantly. And in this economy, they lost high-wage jobs so fast, there wasn't even enough money hanging around to create the low-wage jobs. This is very much like the weakest economies in the United States. During the 10-year period from 1991 to year 2000, we created roughly 25 million new private sector jobs. And on one rainy day, I asked this question: what percentage of the new private sector jobs pay a wage higher than the national average wage? 19%. During the 1990s, 81% of the new jobs created paid a below average wage. Well, I'm pretty curious. And I specialize in local economies. So I asked the question, of the 25 strongest and 25 weakest local economies, what percentage of the new jobs created in their communities pay a wage higher than their average wage? Of the new jobs created in the strongest economies, 1 in every 3. Of the new jobs created. And the weakest economies, they actually lost high-wage jobs. So when we talk about the quality of an economy, we're talking about what people are paid. I don't make an apology for that. I was in Flagstaff, Arizona, speaking to a community group like this several years ago, and I started talking about wages and the quality of the economy, and some bird stood up in the back of the room, started yelling and screaming at me. My quality of life doesn't depend upon money. Money's not the most important thing in the world. All you do is keep talking about money during this presentation. Why do you keep talking about money? Hey, it's an economics presentation. Of course it's about money. And there's nothing more important than money for the things money's intended. Money has purchased better housing, better food, better clothing, more vacation time, a more secure retirement, better education than poverty ever has. And so when we look at the quality of an economy, it's what people earn. I'm going to show you one example of Pinellas County, and this is your wage compared to the national average wage, compared to the 10 strongest and weakest areas. Now, it doesn't matter that you're because of cost of living, that your average wage is at or above the national average wage. San Francisco is certainly a lot more expensive, and New York's more expensive than Pinellas County. So you would demand that their wages be higher. But what we need to do is look at improving inequality is if you're at 72% one year of the national average wage, and you go to 73 and 74, you're improving relative to the nation. So what are your lines? If the line goes up, it's good. If the line goes down, it's bad. Here are the 10 strongest areas, and for almost the last 25 years, they've improved relative to the nation. Here are those 10 weakest areas. They've dropped. They used to be at the national average, national wage, and now they're about 78%. Here's Pinellas County. Kind of improved a little bit in the 90s, but since roughly 1999 has been on decline relative to the nation. A gradual dilution in the quality of the economy. All right. These are the wages paid for the last 10 years in about all of your industrial subsectors. Anybody in the room can read those little no, you can't read it. I can't even read them, but I know what they are. What we have here is a cluster of roughly 3 groups. So this includes, these are the average earnings per worker. It includes your wages and salaries, the profits of proprietors, plus fringe benefits, contributions to private retirement programs, bonuses, tips, all of that is thrown into this. And there's a cluster of 3 industrial groups here. Utilities, because they get a lot of overtime. Corporate headquarters is second. In that particular year, there must have been a lot of bonuses paid out. And federal government workers. Federal government typically, when you include all this stuff, is the highest paying industrial sector in the country. Then we drop down to a cluster here of really good wages, $55,000 to $70,000 a year. This is 2012 right in here. So you have manufacturing, you have professional, you have local government, information technology, a nice cluster of good industrial sectors paying a good wage. Then we notice this big drop right here. Big drop. And this begins with private sector educational, retailing, other services, which is like auto body shops, maids in private homes, the administrative services, which is typically temporary employment agencies, and hotel, motel, and restaurants. A cluster of low wage, roughly about $23,000 a year in industrial sectors. So this is the spread that you have of wages paid within Pinellas County relative to quality. So let me summarize. The county has declined as a result of losing primary jobs. Pretty easy. Wait till we get to these bullet points, you know. If you don't go home with anything else, we'll remember these 5 things. So how do we improve a local economy? It is really simple. Create more primary industry jobs which pay a wage higher than the national average wage, or your area average wage. By doing this, more money will flow into the economy, and the overall quality will improve. And the quality improves is because there's a hydraulic pressure that occurs. When you create primary jobs at this point, that literally pulls everything up to that point, improving everyone's standard of living and everyone's disposable income. If you create the primary jobs in the lower sector, that literally will pull everything toward it, causing a weakening in the quality of the economy. So we need to create more primary industry jobs. It's not necessarily the jobs, the employers who then hire people, and through their wages and payroll, that money goes into the economy, and those employers also spend money on the products and services they need to function. So the primary companies are actually the drivers of this. So as a result, and understanding that, I was asked to do another goal study. And this goal study, same process, look into the future and project where you will be if you do nothing. Second, I'll create economic scenarios for you. And this projections this time around, I want to give you an idea of what I base this on. Number 1, the national economy will have modest growth over the next 10 years. The summary of this is that you cannot depend upon the national government for any help, not the national government, the national economy for anything. I'm looking out the next 5 to 6, 7 years. If we have 2.5% economic growth on a national basis during that period of time, we will be lucky. For the 50 years, from 1950 to the year 2000, we averaged 7% per year economic growth in this country. So far this century, including the building boom, we've averaged 4%. The last 3 or 4 years, it realistically is under 2%. I project that this year we will finish at 2.2%, next year probably at 2% after adjusting for inflation. Guess what that is? Nothing. Virtually no economic growth will occur. Therefore, communities are on their own. If you're going to improve your economy, you will have to do it in spite of what is happening on a national basis. There will be a gradual decline in the number of retirement age people in this county over the next 15 years, and that's what the projections I'm making. There will likely be a continued long-term decline in the number of people employed in manufacturing in the county. And as a result of not having greenfield industrial property, growth in virtually all primary industries will stall and will likely decline. All these things are going to happen if you do nothing. So what do the projections look like? Well, numerically, I'm going to just show you employment growth. I went through a whole bit different scenarios. During the 1990s, you averaged 2.5% per year in job growth. This century, 0.1%. The projections are going to show that you will lose jobs at the average annual rate of 0.4%. Employment was today is roughly 546,000. By 2030, you will have roughly 30,000 fewer people working in the county than you do today, if the projections come true. And this graphically is what we have here. This is just jobs. This, I think, is 1990. So we're cruising along here adding jobs, and we slowed up a little bit, and then we took off, then we had our big decline, and this is where we are today, and this is the projections, that probably by 2030, you will lose roughly 30,000 jobs. Now, remember my projections back in 2002, how I was wrong? I think I'm wrong on this. I think that if you do nothing, it will be worse than this, because the forces are working against you. The river is flowing against your county. There's no favorable wind to try to keep this from being prevented. And you will learn that as I continue through this. All right, so what did I do? I created a goal, a reasonable, achievable goal. And what I did it by pouring money into your economy through the formation of primary jobs. And I chose these industries. I did it somewhat proportional to what you have now. Actually, I did fewer manufacturing than I did corporate headquarters. But I tossed those into the economy, and there was a ripple effect, a multiplier effect that occurred, and I created 3 scenarios for you, giving you 3 options. Number 1, the minimum effort. The minimum effort would cause the addition of primary jobs at the rate which would prevent decline and bring you clear up to the 2003 level of employment. The good effort, the addition of primary jobs at the rate at which will improve the overall economy. And the strong effort, the addition of primary jobs at the annual rate which approached what you did in the 1990s, but actually was less than that, which would significantly improve your economy. So what would be the results of these scenarios? Well, during these are the primary jobs created. From 1993 to 2000, you created roughly 20,000 primary jobs, 2,500 a year. During this century, you averaged a minus 900 per year. The minimum effort asks that you create 1,000, good effort 1,500, and the strong effort 2,000. The employment, if you achieve the goals, here's your projection. Minimum effort, a whole 1%, 1/10 of 1%. Job growth, good effort, 5/10, strong effort, 8/10. This is the result visually. Here are the projections. Here is minimum effort, not much hack. You just stop bleeding here, then you take off. Here's good effort. And it's only good effort that gets your employment above what it was at your peak in roughly 2006. All righty. The county can have quality economic growth. Primary industries cause a problem. You decline because you lost the jobs. You can have quality economic growth. There are certain things all areas must do to build their economy. I'm going to go through several of them rather quickly. Number 1. Communities must review objectively your geographic economic assets and liabilities. Keep in mind that primary employers don't have to be located in your community to sell their stuff. They can be located anywhere. And as a result, where they are located influences their operating costs and therefore their profitability. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that does that. Whether or not there's interstate highway, air access, utility costs, insurance, property tax rates, personal income tax, telecommunications, labor costs. There's a list of some 100 items that a sharp CPA will go through for a corporation to determine these costs. of being located in Pinellas County versus Albuquerque, New Mexico versus Atlanta, Georgia. And every community needs to reduce these as much as possible for your primary employers. Number two, need to engage higher education resources in economic development. If communities are not doing this, you will likely fail. The future of our country is not only having smart people, but smart people who are able to assist the private sector in developing their products, training workers, and facilitating production and everything and processes. Communities, there's several communities in the United States which began doing this some 10, 15, 20 years ago. Two of those are on that list, Raleigh and Charlotte. And communities that are doing it today have the best chance of succeeding. We're talking about research universities, any higher education institution can help economic development. Through the commercialization of research, joint efforts between private sector and educational university programs, letting your private sector companies use university assets and laboratories. I was in a community, I won't tell you which one it is because they still hire me. I tell you, it was Reno. When I first went to Reno in 2002 or 2003, I was looking around, they have the University of Nevada there. And I said, gee, you guys, you're making this nice transition from gaming to industry. And I said, but you got this asset here. You have this great university. How are your relations with the university? And he says, well, they're little tents. The university president, not only can we not get an appointment with him, no private businesses are allowed on campus. I said, what? No, we're not allowed there. It's his world. Well, guess what? They changed presidents. And a completely different attitude. They want to join with companies, do joint research, do all this stuff. And that type of activity is essential anymore regarding education and the private sector. Incubator startups, curricula serving major issue. Number three, provide a trained or trainable workforce. This is the second most important issue relative to economic development. And let me explain the importance of it. We saw our ladder, this is a wage skill ladder. Suppose you have a company looking at Pinellas County, and they anticipate for what they do, they're going to have to pay $65,000 in our area, this area that we're in. Now, if they have to pay $65,000 a year, they want to make sure the workers are worth it. But they won't look at the workers employed at $65,000. That would be too hard to compete for that kind of labor. What they do is drop down a level to the 55s and perhaps even the 45s, and they will ask the question, if these individuals are trainable, and if there are enough of them to justify the 65, I'll go there. And so suppose they're going to hire 500 people from this group into that group. Well, that creates a void. Suction occurs. Hydraulic pressure from the bottom pushes people, these employers here who hired at 55 now look to the 45. And if they are trained, they'll move up that ladder. Then this group has to pull from this group, and then this group has to pull from this group, and this is that pressure from the top sucking up the bottom, eventually pulling people who have never been in the workforce into the entry level. If training is available. I've got communities that I do work with that they pay 100% of all the training for all the companies, the primary companies in their town. The community college has bays at the community college with the equipment from these companies set up. And if you're going to get hired at that company, you have to go through that community college training right there on that equipment in that community college. It is just wonderful, this relationship that they have, but training is absolutely necessary. Number four, fund a professionally managed economic development program. Remember I said that 25 strongest economies have been doing that, and they've been doing it for quite some time. There's three basic programs that they do. An existing industry program, which takes care of your existing primary employers. It is the cheapest thing to do, but the most important thing to do. Is much easier to keep what you have than to try to recruit new. The existing industry programs save and cause the expansion of your existing primary employers. Number two, the recruitment program. Recruit new primary employers to the area that pay the wage higher than your area average wage. And your economic development group also helps in starting up new companies that will eventually be primary in nature. Now, I've run through this stuff pretty quick. All those first 4 steps. Why did I run through it? Because I wasn't paid to do a completely evaluation of your entire economic development program, and it wasn't even necessary anyway. Because you're doing a large number of things better than anybody in the country. You are doing a lot of things very well. Almost everything you're doing well. Therefore, the issue of trying to evaluate whether or not your utility rates is not necessary. You would not have all those quality employers in your community today if you didn't have and weren't doing all this stuff. So I compliment you on it. Pinellas County is doing virtually everything exceptionally well.